Two experts in ICF.
Yeah.
Decades of experience. One podcast.
Yeah.
Two hosts with a lot to say.
Look, I cannot sit through a struggle. I gotta get up and hustle. I gotta push through the pain, cause really that's how you build muscle.
Welcome to the Build with ICF podcast with your hosts, Trevor Brown and Heather Herring Brown. Yep, they're a package deal. With over 20 years of ICF installation experience, Trevor can throw down some expertise on sales, marketing, and training. On the other side of the table sits Heather, aka the girl boss, and she's earned the title as the owner of an award-winning ICF construction company, a drafting and design company specializing in ICF. And the numbers? With a master's in accounting, she does that too. Sleeves up, boots on. This is the Build with ICF podcast.
I don't want nothing for free. I'm here to work. Been through the dirt. I've been through the dirt. Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah.
Here we are, episode 5 now.
Wow, it's going fast.
It's flying by. I want to apologize right off the bat for everybody that was listening in the last episode. I went back and listened to it, and I was like very monotone, very mellow, which is totally not me. I mean, I get like this is our tame podcast that we will have to be a little more careful on. So maybe I was just subdued. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't hopped up. I drink coffee. I was good to go. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, I apologize. Kind of lame on the last one. I'm going to step it up this time.
I don't think it was lame. I think that was just a lot of information.
It was. I was thinking, so I wasn't talking. Sometimes I talk and don't think. Sometimes I think and don't talk.
Okay.
You can attest to the talking and not thinking part.
Yeah.
But no, it's I'm going to fix it. And I might even work in some sound effects on this one. I don't know.
Okay.
I got a whole soundboard here and I never use it.
Okay. Well, let's see.
Anyway, so this episode, we're going to get into how to make ICF construction comparable, the same, maybe a little bit less in some cases, maybe a little bit more in some cases, but trying to match that, doing the things you need to do to get the pricing down to a level that is competitive with what we see in the market.
Comparing apples to apples really is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we want to educate you on why. Like sometimes you'll see, we get calls all the time. I've spent 20 plus years getting calls from people going, "You said this was the same price as 2x6," and we're like, "Well, we do. We sell it for the same prices. I mean, we quote people the same square footage price that we do for a 2x6 home." And they're like, I did it, and it was 20% higher. And usually, one of us will dig into their bids, and we'll take a look at it, and we'll go, "Okay, yeah, well here's why." It's pretty easy to figure out. There's a lot of different things. So we're going to basically go through, in this episode, I want to go through just kind of the real bare bones of like the things you need to be aware of to keep that price of your ICF build down. I mean, down to where it should be.
Yeah. And I think it's keeping the pricing down, but it's also when you're running your estimates and you're getting bids from people, it's making sure that they are bidding correctly. They're not putting materials in there that you don't need. And because, to be honest, like the majority of construction is, wood framed homes. So when you're sending it off to an estimation company or an estimation department at your local lumber store, they're not used to looking at ICF. So it's a little bit different in how they're going to look at it and what they're going to include, because it's not going to include a lot of things.
Well, I think when we jumped ahead a little bit there, let's start with the real basic, which again, something you speak very well to, is the drafting part, right?
Yes.
I mean, before you got to get a bid, you got to go into the drafting, right?
Yeah.
And then in our last episode, we talked about choosing the right block, and choosing that right block is going to dictate some of the cost part, which we'll get into, but like going down that step, we talked about, okay, you've made the choice to go with ICF. Now you're going to make the choice of what block you want to go with. Now you're going to make your choice for who's going to draw your plans for you, and you're going to start designing your ICF home. And in that, knowing, and the reason why as a drafting company you say, bring me your ideas, but also bring me the block that you want to use, because you guys are going to work around that. Maybe explain that and how that's going to affect it.
Well, I think one of the things to know, and part of why I started the drafting company, is because like understanding the block, understanding the best way to utilize the block and not waste it is super important when you're drawing your plans. So, we can customize your plans and make them to the exact measurements so that we reduce waste. One of the first homes that we did after the drafting company, we drew specific to the sizes of the corners and the length of the straights and our T blocks and, all these different things so that I wanted to walk out of there with like one 55-gallon trash bag of trash. And we did it, but it took the planning ahead of time so that we weren't wasting material.
Right. And to put that kind of in layman terms, if you're looking at a wall and you have a window placed at a certain spot in the wall or a corner and it's landing, if you know the measurements of the block you're using, you could actually land that window in an increment that would be a reusable piece of material. Because one of the biggest things that people make the mistake of, and it was kind of funny, we were scrolling through I was looking for some old ICF pictures, and I came across one that I took a picture of a job site, and I don't even recall what job site it was. It was just randomly saw that this pile of ICF, and I opened it up and looked at it. I'm like, oh, I remember that was, I don't remember what job site, but I went somewhere and there was a heaping pile of block. And I mean, there was chunks in there that were almost a half, half, three-quarters of a block in this. And I'm like, why is that in the junk? The really unique thing about ICF that makes people like, and another amazing reason to go with ICF, you can take your scraps out of the scrap pile and down to a 6-inch piece. If you've got, 3-inch, or depending upon what your web spacing is. So we're used to working with 6-inch web spacing. So if we have a 6-inch piece of block, meaning we've got 3 inches of EPS, we have one web, and we have 3 inches of EPS. If that cut, I can cut 100 feet of those and put them in a place in the right spot in the wall. And I can explain that too. But basically I can take that junk pile and I can sit in that junk pile for 30 minutes and I can cut out little 6-inch pieces or just increments of 6 out of all that junk that he was throwing, all that money he was throwing in the dumpster. And I can put it back in the wall. Every 4 feet of that I save out of the dumpster is, in a lot, in depending on where you are and what block you're using, anywhere from, $30, or $25 to $35 that you just saved out of your dumpster. Now, what's unique about that is you can't do that with a stud. I can't go and want to make a header and take a bunch of pieces of 4x8 and link them together and make a structural header. I can't take a 2x4 and take a bunch of 6-inch pieces of 2x4, nail them together and call it a stud. I can't do that. So there basically is ways that, big chunks of lumber, sheets of plywood, all that stuff that gets thrown in the dumpster legitimately doesn't have any use anymore. It's not structurally safe. We have a product that when we cut that up, we can take the small, down to a 6-inch chunk of block. I can put that in a wall. And obviously the way we do that, just to kind of jump into that a little bit, is you don't ever put those down in the bottom of the wall. Like you always basically, I say, like, if I'm doing an 8-course stack, in course 6, 7, I'm throwing all those pieces in courses 6 and 7, and I'm just stuffing them in there. And what it is you got to imagine you've got a solid piece of block on the bottom. You put a bunch of these small ones in the next one, and then you put another solid block on top. They're all going to hold each other together very well. I mean, these blocks that are made today are phenomenal. I mean, they're not weak. They don't have any, and as long as there's no cracks in them or anything, and your locking nubs are all good, they're going to lock together. It literally doesn't know the difference that it's not a solid block, right? As long as you have one above holding it and one below holding it. And even in some cases, I've seen guys use them just in their top course and just, band them with wood and stuff. And all you got to do is hold those things together until the concrete's, solid, right? So for the most part, that's a big part of it. So going back to the design side of it, one way to keep that pile low is to take your measurements as a designer. So when you guys are designing this and drafting this, you're looking at it and going, if I move this window over 4 inches, I'm going to be on a 6-inch increment that's going to work for the block company, or I'm on this increment because I'm coming off a corner. Anyways, there's ways to predict where that falls and how many cuts you're going to have to make that.
It's the layout where you put them. It's also there's certain size windows that work better than others depending on the block.
Right.
And working with an ICF knowledgeable design firm, architect or drafting is crucial in that.
It's huge. Yeah.
And we're not the only ones. There's lots. We're gonna have Robert Klobb on the podcast soon because he's the OG, and he refers clients to us. We refer clients to him as well. So it's starting with that design firm and knowing which block you're going to use.
Well, and
now,
even height, like where you put it, height in the wall, not just the width of where you put it. It's okay, are you talking about a block that, we have blocks out there that are 12 inches. We have blocks in height, and we have 12, majority of them are at 16 inches, and we've got some that are 24 inches. It just depends 18, on what,
24,
18s and 24s. So like you've got different dimensions. So you may move that window where it sits to dictate that too. That's going to save on some cuts.
And this is like really important, I think, for people to understand too, is just because you're building with ICF does not mean we're building a rectangular structure, that it's perfectly square. Stuff that is designed today, stuff that we design, you cannot tell that it's ICF from the outside when the house is done.
No. Yeah.
It looks just as beautiful as any other stick frame. You can do so much, and I tell all of our clients that you are limited by your imagination and your checkbook. So we can do whatever you want to do within reason. But if you're trying to save money, we're going to help you with that. We're going to try to reduce the number of corners, the number of jogs. We're going to go with a certain size window. There's ways to do it to reduce it, but I'm not trying to be the same cost as a starter home, a track home, or however you say it, track. We're not trying to. That's not my market. So I'm going for the higher end home, the more custom luxury home. But
right.
you can do every single level in ICF just like you can out of wood.
Right. And I think we'll go over that at the end of the podcast a little bit more. Like let's recap. Let's go through all the things that what changes the price. And then I want to talk I see what you're touching on there, and I want to talk about that at the very end of like, okay, now let me explain why all these things don't matter as much. You know what I mean? We'll get into that in closing, but I think right now, if we just go down the line of the things that people they need to look at to keep the cost down. So the next most important thing that you've already kind of touched on, and it goes right from the next step in the process is, drawing the plans. Now you got your plans in your hand. You've had a qualified draftsman drafting company take this and draw it into the correct increments, and everything's gold and this is going to keep the waste down. Now you got to go get a bid from the lumber company, because as much as we don't want to use wood, there's places for wood in a house. It's not the exterior walls, but there is places for wood, and you are going to be required to have a wood interior walls. You're going to have some, the roof sheathing and different things. There's places for it. Right. There's going to be things that you're going to use it. So now you take it to the estimator, and you've kind of touched on this. Like when you hand that to the estimator, they need to know what they're looking at. Yeah, because they're used to, at the lumber company, they're used to taking a lineal footage of your perimeter, and there's a calculation. It tells them how many 2x6s and how many sheets of OSB and, your headers and all of that kind of stuff. We're going to eliminate all of that exterior wall OSB, all that sheathing we're going to eliminate. We're going to eliminate the headers, the 2x or 4x8 headers and all that kind of stuff. We're going to eliminate that because we're going to do concrete lintels. We're also going to be eliminating the insulation in your exterior walls. So we're speeding up construction because we're kind of doing the framing, the insulation, and the sheathing all at once. Yeah, it's tough because coming from I was an estimator for a while in my early years for multiple lumber companies. We actually, my dad and I had a estimating company that we basically used to do material takeoffs for multiple lumber yards in town. And so I was that guy. I know, and you're right. We have a cheat sheet and we have a calculator that we actually put in, a multiplier for interior. We basically would pen out. We would, we'd roller. We had a roller pen. We'd roller pen out everything, measure it for lineal footage of 2x6, 2x4, blah blah blah. Hit a button. Okay, and it should be ingrained in my brain, but I think I blocked it out because it was driving me crazy. I looked at so many plans, but literally there's a multiplier that you have for every plan that's the same. So every house was 2x6 construction or was 2x construction. Even when I started, we were still able to do 2x4 exterior walls, which is scary, crazy. But, we had multipliers for everything, and I had multipliers for how much sheathing there was. All of that was based upon the standard construction that we're used to. 16-inch on center, everything was wood construction. So when we have to, you have to be empathetic to the estimator to understand that his day, 90, right now probably 92 out of 100 sets of plans he looks at is a 2x6 wood construction house.
Yeah.
He's not used to thinking outside of that. So you have some empathy for him and say, okay, I understand, but we have to look at this. Unfortunately, we have to break this plan down a little bit more than that, because I don't need exterior studs. I don't need sheathing. I don't need Tyvek. I don't need headers. Headers is probably the biggest one we miss, or that people miss.
That people miss, yeah.
Probably the biggest one we see. So when we go back, I go, because they're extremely expensive, and when all of a sudden they got LVLs and they're like, dude, you got $6,000 in LVLs and headers and Simpson hangers, like Simpson ties are a big one.
Or the straps.
The strapping, the sheet, for shear. And so like shear straps, hurricane straps, a lot of this stuff that we don't need. They're just used to, they don't know what to take out because they're not educated on it. Yeah. So what I highly suggest, and I do this as part of my services that I do, like I will, you should have your local, professional, whether that be the distributor or the rep. You should ask whoever you're working with, whatever block company you're working with, to try to see if they can set up a lunch and learn. I used to do those a ton. I used to go around to all the lumber yards, and I'd buy them sandwiches or I'd buy them pizza, and we would have a 1 hour, and I would go over with all their estimators what they need to know, and their outside sales guys and their counter sales guys, and we would educate them on what to take out of the plan. Because if you stop and you're like, God, this is coming out really expensive, let's stop and go look at these items. And the first thing I look at is their LVLs, is their 4x8s and 4x10s, because you don't need those, because they're figuring those for over the headers. Yeah. So look at that stuff and make sure that's not in there, because that's probably going to be the first thing. And like I said, no, we're not picking on those guys. They literally don't know what they don't know. So it's our job to educate them in the industry. Tell them to listen to the podcast. How about that?
There we go.
They can reach out to me.
So it's obvious when you're doing ICF that they're not doing 2x6 exterior walls. That's kind of the obvious part. The other part that they just don't understand is these other things.
Yeah, and even sheathing. I mean, I've seen huge. I mean, and now, the OSB's back down to only god awful levels, not like completely ridiculous levels. Yeah. But when we were doing $90 a sheet, and you cut out all the OSB on the outside of a house except for the roof sheathing, oh man! That's where we were coming in under stick frame for a while. Yeah. And so that's a big part of it. But that's a big one. I'd probably say the next one that people miss is the HVAC system. Yeah, HVAC is where people don't like. I've messed. I love analogies. I do too many of them. People make fun of me that are around me all the time, because they're like, you have an analogy for everything. And this has been one I've had a hard time like coming up with the correct analogy. But it's basically like, if your house is so insulated, why, if you're, I guess I'm struggling with this.
You're struggling with this, yeah.
But let's put it this way. If you have a car that is super fuel efficient, and it gets 100 miles to the gallon, and then you have another car that gets 5 miles to the gallon, they both don't need the same size of gas tank.
Exactly.
Maybe that's the best analogy.
That's a really good analogy.
That one.
Yeah.
So I'm on one tonight. I'm good. I'm coming up with analogies. Here we go. My voice is going up and down again. I'm not being boring. So basically, you don't need, if obviously to go 5 miles a gallon, you're going to need a bigger tank, to get to the same distance.
From point A to point B, yes.
And then to go point A to point B, you could have a smaller tank. So HVAC companies don't, and again, not picking on them, but this I have been a little frustrated with just in my travels and speaking with people. I've butted my head against this a lot more. It tends to be a commission sales guy that sells your HVAC system. He's usually paid by how much he sells. So he doesn't want to dumb down your HVAC system on your ICF house because he's not going to make as much commission. So he's trying to sell you, yeah, we got you figured for this many tonnage. We got this, this is what we came back.
It's the standard. This is what we do.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
This many square feet. This da 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 da. We're like, well, yeah, but you're talking about and realistically, and we'll go into this in our R value episode, but realistically, a 2x6 house with an R19 bat in it, when you take out the R value of the 2x6s every 16 inches, which is basically like having a slit in your house every 16 inches that's allowing everything to run through it, you can only really get about an R14, 13 to 14 out of that house. I mean, if you talk to guys that do blower door tests, that do HERS ratings and do that, they basically will give you credit on an R19 house. Technically, the house itself, when you take out, because you can't it's not like the whole house is wrapped consistently in an R19. It's R19.
Some markets are starting to require
continuous insulation, but they're still not R19.
Yeah,
they're putting an R5 on the outside of the house in rigid foam, but they're not putting, but you still got to imagine when we shoot that house with a thermal gun, which we've done 1,000 times, that house looks like a candy cane. It's striped. No way around it. There's stripes in it. You can see where the studs are right through the thermal gun. And so there's no way you're getting that full credit of R19 in that pat, right? With an ICF house, you will see that we are going to test somewhere in the end. This is where everybody's going to debate. I'm sure I'll get comments on this, but consistently this is my opinion, consistently what we've got back on our tests, somewhere between 52 and 55. That's
performs as,
right?
Yeah.
Equivalent to. That's pretty standard. When I started in the ICF business, 20 years ago, we had T-shirts and coffee mugs that said R50 houses. We were able to advertise that all over, and then stick frame guys came in and threatened to sue us and kill us or whatever they were going to do. But so we had to stop using that term because it's not an R value, it's a K value, but we'll get into that into another episode. But they, that's that thing that you have to look at. You have to go, okay, so if this house is, let's just, for sake of argument, let's say it's an R50 house and this one's an R15 house. You don't need the same size HVAC system to heat an R50 house. I mean, we're sitting here in one right now. We know exactly what it costs us to run, and it is pennies compared to what our neighbor next door pays on their stick frame house, right? We know that we're 25% of what they pay for the house next door. So we know for a fact that we don't require the same size of HVAC unit. That can be and you're the numbers girl, so you tell me what kind of savings that is. How much is a normal house in HVAC and what they're putting into it?
Well, every market's going to be different on that. But what I can say is when you're talking to your HVAC rep, like most areas require what is called a manual J. So you have to lay out the ducting and the sizing and how it's all going to work. And so when they're starting to do that with an ICF home, they start to see that they don't require as much ducts. They don't require the tonnage on the air conditioning and all that kind of stuff. I don't know a ton about HVAC. I just know that our systems are typically 33% to 50% smaller than a traditional stick-built home as our HVAC systems. And so it does save money because we are not needing as much. So not only is it saving you money on the materials that are going into your home for that HVAC system, it's saving you money month after month after month in utility costs.
Right. And what I hate seeing, and I've seen it so many times where people just don't believe that. And so they're like, well, I'm just going to buy it. And then years later, they're like, dude, this is an honest to God, true story. This has happened multiple times to me. People have said, I wish I wouldn't have put an air conditioner in. Mm-hmm. That was the dumbest thing I did. I spent this money on this, expensive brand new air conditioner, and I've never turned it on. Yeah. We live in a house where we're in the high, we live in the mountains, but it gets hot here. We do get over in the 90s. We're high mountain desert basically. We get over the 90s for weeks at a time in the summertime. We do not have an air conditioner. We do not have any forced air. We have heated floors, and that's it.
Yes.
And ceiling fans. And our house stays too cold. We actually will open our doors in the summertime to warm the house up because it's too cold inside. So that is the actual facts that we live with every day. And so I can tell you for a fact, I get people that call me and go, they were just furious that they got talked into putting an air conditioner in a house. And I go, I told you that. And no one Nobody believes you, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, go to the other side of that right now, because we have a client right now that went with mini splits, and HVAC was telling him he didn't need as much as what he thought he did, and so he added more heat, not more air conditioning.
mm-hmm.
He added more heat in the form of wall heaters, thermostat controlled wall heaters, but that he added so many, it made us have to go from a 200 amp service to a 400 amp service.
Right. So there's more cost.
So there's more cost right there in that, because he was worried about it, but those heaters are probably never, ever going to be used.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing how it's a huge trust. It's a leap of faith. And I tell people all the time, it's like, you don't have to fully commit to this. Like, I mean, I've told hundreds of people probably, you don't have to commit to it. If you want to plummet,
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead and plummet. I mean, put in
Do the wiring, pre-wire.
Pre-wire for it if you want to have it, and then that way you can buy the unit later and add it and be like, haha, Trevor was wrong. Heather and Trevor lied to me. My ICF house doesn't. I'm telling you, I've been doing this for too long with too many people. If your ICF house is eating up energy, whether that be heat or cold, you have some void somewhere. You need to have your house shot with a thermal gun. You need to look for density in there. You've got some voids or something's going wrong, because there's no chance. The other thing is too, is that let's just say that does happen. I mean, I'm just to play devil's advocate. Just the ICF alone is an R22.
Yeah, without anything in
Consistent R22. No striping. That's a continuous insulation R22, right? It's got just with no concrete in it. So keep that in mind. So when you were talking about like going against or hitting with or competing with an R19 stick frame, that R19 stick frame is, I should have looked again. I should know this. I talk about it all the time, but I think it's an R5 is what you get on a 2x6.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a 2x6 R5. So every 16 inches, there's an R5. That's where the stripe comes from. An ICF house, even if you can't obviously put trusses on a house without any concrete in it. But if you were to put no concrete in that wall, it's an R22. So that's where a lot of this argument, I'm like, how do people want to try to tell me it's not a 50 after I put 6 inches of concrete in the wall between an R22, with the R22 insulation? Like, give me a break. But I'm trying to stay unopinionated, remember? Okay.
Yes, you are.
I'm not using profanity, and I'm being unopinionated. I'm trying to just give information.
Yes.
You don't want to get me fired up about people that argue with me about R50. But anyway.
That's for a future episode.
Yeah, probably.
Another spot that you save money, and this is one of the things that I didn't even think about this when I was first, doing ICF. It actually was brought to my attention by my subcontractor. So is with drywall. So we have started looking at it from when I built with 2x6s to building with ICF. We are using we have less waste, which means we're utilizing our drywall more efficiently.
Right.
So we're not hauling as much away. They're not hauling it off to the dump or, going through it, trying to piece it together to use for scraps on another job. So we're using less, which means we're not having to do the standard multiplier for waste.
And let me explain the logistics of that a little bit. So if you're asking, if you're listening to this going, okay, how's that make any sense? Well, let me try to give you a visual here. So when you're sheetrocking a wall, a stick frame wall, there is obviously voids between the 16-foot section that you cannot attach to, right?
16-inch section.
16 inch, yeah.
Yeah.
If you do 16 foot on center studs, bad construction. I'm not a stick frame guy, but don't do that. So 16 inch on center. So basically what happens is say you get to a spot, window, whatever it is, but you get to an area where you're going to have to cut a sheet and it doesn't land, because unfortunately framers sometimes don't do exactly 16 inch on center to land perfectly where it needs to be. So if that gets off at all and the sheet hangs over, you got to cut the sheet back. So the guy's got to reach in his pouch. He's got to grab his sheet knife out. He's got to cut it. He's got to slap it up there. He's got to put a couple screws in it. He's got to butt the next sheet up, put some screws in it, and move on. The sheets of sheetrock on a ICF house is a solid substrate behind it anywhere it lands. So if the sheet lands between studs, quote unquote studs, the 6-inch or 8-inch on center polypropylene web. You can leave it there, go back to the stud, you just leave it hanging, if you will. Go back to the stud, screw back there, butt the next one in, screw it to the next stud. The seam can land in the middle. So on a wood frame house, if you put a seam in the middle, it would break, right? There's nothing supporting behind it.
Yeah,
You
as soon
could
as they
push
go
your
to
hand
tape
through
that
it.
seam,
They're going to tape the seam. That seam's going to crack. They can't do it. So it has to land dead center in the middle of a stud, which is frustrating because, like I said, with lumber the way it is, with the way people frame, that's a real struggle for your guys. Like they ask any sheetrocker, they'll tell you, the studs aren't straight. Guys don't put them exactly 16 on center. They don't land on an actual 8-inch or a 8-foot sheet or a 12-foot sheet exactly the way they're supposed to. It's very frustrating. This, they can just blow and go from corner to corner or corner to opening without ever touching their knife. And they just go boom, 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 boom. You don't have the popping. Yeah, you don't have, everyone, if you, it's usually more inexpensive newer homes. You see it more than actually in the old homes because the wood was better back then, but the new wood causes a lot of sheetrock pops.
Homes settle. The first couple of years, homes are going to settle.
Studs move, they twist, especially
they
in high ceiling type areas. You usually see a lot of them up at a high area in that 20-foot, 16-foot, 20-foot areas. But the sheetrock pops, right? You don't have that issue.
No.
On an ICF home. So you basically are able to, they can
reduces your callbacks.
Yeah. So it reduces your callback. So, if you're doing this from a standpoint of an investor or builder, you're not dealing with that because your sheetrock's not popping. The same as like stucco, for example.
Yep. That's why that's where I was going next.
So stucco is another big cost savings that you can do with, everybody that stick frames a home. And again, I kind of get in trouble because I'm not super versed in all the different stuccos around the country because I've been told different stuccos in different areas. I know there's EFIS versus traditional scratch coat. There's there's different things, right? So bear with me. There, from what I am aware of,
this is a very
web,
generalization.
Correct, but in most cases, they have to put some sort of some foam below what they're putting on, or chicken wire or something. They usually don't attach a lot of it right to the wood. It's usually going to be some kind of foam wrap or something that they put on it,
or they put like, it almost looks like a tar paper.
Yeah,
up,
like
and then
a paper.
They put
There's like a substrate behind it.
Yeah.
ICF is designed for stucco. It just goes right on it. Like you just attach to it. Boom. You're done. So like it's very friendly with the stucco. And again, just like the sheetrock pops, my own parents' house. So we built that house, 20 years ago or whatever, and it was back when ICF was considerably more. I mean, we're talking like we were in the 15 to 20% higher than stick frame. When we built that. So we used to do, you try to eliminate as much of the ICF as you could because the stick frame was cheaper. So most of our garages were all stick frame. Yeah. Because they have big garage doors. They're not efficient. Who cares? We just want to keep the house warm. So we would just do the inner envelope. We would not do the garage out of ICF. So my parents' house is a stucco house. The only place they have cracks on their stucco is on the garage.
That's also where it faded the most,
Correct, yeah, because the heat and cool temperatures. So their garage is a little different shade than the house, and you can see the difference, and you can see the cracking. So it's obvious. It's things under stucco that move cause cracks. When you you stucco a ICF house, you don't have those callbacks. You don't have issues. So as a builder, you're not dealing with it. No homeowner wants their house to be all cracked up either. So there's benefits to the homeowner. It's a huge.
So if you're gonna go with stucco, or you don't really, you're looking for the more inexpensive, hassle-free, maintenance-free, stucco might be another cost savings for you that gets those prices down and gets you closer to comparable with.
Right, and we have had people. We're not considered a big stucco market in the Northwest. Down in the Southwest, obviously, is really popular, but we are seeing more people go with stucco up here, and I think a lot of it, especially on ICF houses, and we even have people that mix it, kind of call it the chalet, the ski chalet kind of look, where they're mixing in the stucco with the wood siding and stuff, but they're eliminating a lot of the wood siding because that's more expensive, keeping their costs down because they can get a better deal on the stucco, because your stucco guys usually are like, oh, I don't have to wrap it, I don't have to do any, like they cut that out, and so you save that money. And like any of this, and it really is, you have to be an advocate for your checkbook.
Yes. You
have to really sit down and talk to your stucco guy and say, look, I know this is going to be less money because you would have to on a, I don't want the same price that you quoted me on a stick frame house. And sometimes it's interesting to get a quote from somebody, ask what they are a square foot and then say, okay, what are you on ICF? And they're like, oh, it's the same. Well, no, it shouldn't be the same because your materials are less. Your time is less.
Your time is less.
How are you quoting me the same price if you don't have to go back and put foam or tar paper or if the wire, whatever you're putting on, like you don't have to do that.
The prep work is less on an ICF home.
Yeah. You need to do that with your sheetrock company. And when you get your sheetrock bid and go, okay, well, is this your standard price? Yes. Okay, well, this is an ICF house. You're not going to have to cut it back to the studs. I mean, they need to understand that. You should be getting a discount for that.
Well, they should be changing the multiplier on the waist.
Correct. And their speed. They're going to get out of there in, a lot faster time if they're not having to cut all the sheets, cut everything back. The other one is that's really hard to fight, but you got to find a good electrician that understands ICF.
Yes.
If you find a good electrician that understands ICF, they're going to tell you that they can save money doing that. Because just imagine this is a very layman way to think about it. If I hand you a hole saw with a 1-inch bit on it and you have a 20-foot wall with studs every 16 inches and you have to sit and drill a hole through every one of those studs to run your Romax down to the other end, versus I'll stand on the other side with a cordless chainsaw, a Milwaukee cordless chainsaw, and I will just walk as fast as I can walk, cutting that line in and then pushing the wire into it. Who do you think is going to finish first?
Well, obviously you are.
And I'll finish 10 times faster.
Yeah.
So if your electrician is sitting there talking about all the work that he has to do to run wire and stuff, like he doesn't have to put nail plates up. He doesn't have to do any of that. We'll get into that in our electrical episode.
Yes.
But we, make sure that you can get, pricing down on that. And then, back to the HVAC guy, you have to be able to, be an advocate for your budget, be an advocate for your checkbook. You're the one writing the check. You're the one saving the money. Don't let them tell you that you have to have a 100-gallon tank for your 100 mile an hour, your 100 mile per hour. No.
Mile per gallon.
Almost said a dirty word there. Yeah, you know what I mean. Don't let them sell you a bigger gas tank. You don't need it.
Yeah.
So don't let them oversell you your HVAC if hold to it. And don't be afraid to go talk to another HVAC company and tell them, and I've had this conversation on behalf of my clients before. I'll go to another HVAC company and go, hey, I'm coming to you because I usually go with ABC over here. They do not understand that this home is going to be an R50, and this is what the ManJ says on it. This is, can you sell me the right unit? And I'm not paying for that big unit that they just quoted me for. Can you sell me? Let them know that
Yeah.
and then let them go against it. And that's up to you if you want to go back to your guy and say, hey, I'm going to go with this company because they were, they're shooting me honest and they just saved me $3,000 in my HVAC system or whatever it is, That's how you get your price down. So when people tell me, it's more expensive, I go, I bet you're not fighting. You're not being an advocate for your checkbook.
Yeah.
That's your problem.
And then, I think the big thing that when we're talking to people, when they're trying to get the cost down and they're not seeing the comparable pricing, or they're comparing, this is the bid I got for this, but maybe they didn't start with stick frame. A lot of them have gone to ICF because it is so DIY friendly.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
Yeah. And that's probably like an all-encompassing statement that, a lot of people, to save money, you can stack this yourself.
Yes.
A lot of us, myself included, I'm not a framer by trade. I can do just enough to be dangerous. I'm not fast at it. I'm not efficient. I'd have to ask a few questions here and there. I think that everybody, and I've got, like I said, 20 plus years experience. I don't mean to beat that into the ground, but like I've seen a lot. I've traveled a lot of states. I've talked to a lot of people. I've trained a lot of people. Some of the least knowledgeable building wise people I've ever done, trained, have built the best projects. I think of a guy that he was a school teacher. Him and his son wanted to do a summer project, and they built a cabin. Him and his son together, who was a teenager, and just like I said, gives me chills remembering it because it was just such a great experience. Like they lived in their camper on the job site. It was like a bonding summer for him and his son, and they built their family cabin, and I couldn't believe how good it came out because they both came and took my class. They understood it. They asked me the right questions. I would go up and visit them, and they would have a yellow, legal pad of questions that they'd written down for me. And they'd, we were thinking this, and this. Did amazing things. I mean, there was things I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I wouldn't even think of that. They were teaching me kind of stuff. So know that it's a huge savings in that. And then you look at it on average, I mean, again, we're completely ballparking, and everything I say on this podcast is up for debate with people. It's me speaking from what my own knowledge is, and I'm sure you can debate this. Yeah, it's us in our market. It's what I've seen. I'm sure you can get other answers from other people, but on an average, you're probably going to save, anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 in installation, for a home. Our install crews go out there. It's going to, it's probably going to be, $25,000 to $35,000, have my guys come out and stack that for you, which is still going to bring, that's even doing it with it subbed out. I'm saying we still come in at the stick frame price because framers aren't cheap either. So you're just replacing that framing labor with the stacking labor. So that doesn't affect it. But now think about if you do that yourself and you can take $35,000 or $40,000 or $25,000 even off a small house. You can take that out of your budget that you were going to pay someone else to do it. And even if you hire someone like me to come out and say you pay me $5,000 and I come out 3 times during the build, you just put $20,000 in your pocket, or $30,000 or whatever.
Even if it takes you a little bit longer.
It takes you a little bit longer. You got more time. I love it when people tell me, I get DIY people all the time, I got more time than money. Okay, well, good. Knock it out. I've watched guys build stuff one guy. And just only had people come out there when he needed to put the window bucks in or he needed to, pour the job. Like he, for the most part, build it one man. I've seen it. And build it within weeks, maybe a month. But I think there's things like that you can do to really save.
Yeah.
And especially.
We will talk about that. We're going to talk more DIY.
Yeah, we're going to have a full DIY episode.
Yeah.
We'll actually roll into that after this episode. I think we'll stack it right behind this one. So, but yeah, there's ways to do that and save money. So I think that's a big part. So we're always worried we were going to not be able to get a half hour, and we always go over a half hour. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, this is a long one, but I think it's meaningful because I think this is what everyone keeps, a lot of people call and ask us is, how do I get the cost to be in line with everybody?
More comparable.
So in conclusion, and you touched on it earlier, and I think what we want to, what this whole episode has been about is basically been talking about how to get the cost down to be comparable to what is, I would say considered probably the norm in, let's say median house type build job, which is mostly required by codes and stuff, right? Like, I mean, there's codes for everything that say how much insulation, 2x6 construction, all these things you have to have, how much insulation you have. So they're pretty good, but there's big variance in the quality of home being built. And I think we all, in all fairness, know that there's a low-end home, there's a low-end home builder out there, there's a middle-of-the-road builder, and there's high-end builders. We want to make sure it's apples to apples. You can sit here and blow up my DMs and send me emails about how, no, this is way cheaper. Well, I'm not comparing an R50 soundproof, fireproof, hurricane proof, tornado proof, bulletproof, zombie proof. I'm not comparing that to the cheapest manufactured home you can buy on the market. We're not apples to apples.
Even comparing it to a custom built, like you're still not comparing apples to apples because you're not comparing the insulation levels and the HERS rating and
operational costs of that house. Period.
You're not comparing apples to apples there. However, we're getting as close as we can to, if you're looking at a subdivision, for the last 8 years, I have built in other subdivisions next to stick frame builders, and I sell for the same price as what they do. Right.
And we continue to, here's the analogy I have used a million times, and I think it's very accurate. if you look at these homes as cars, and let's just say, I'm just going to say for the sake of argument, if you want to be that person that says, oh, it's going to, I did my numbers and it's costing me 10% more. Okay. So let's say you got a median house right now that's running in that, 650, 700, let's say it's a $700,000 house. So you're saying it costs you $770, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for $70,000, you're going to go from an R19 house to an an R13 house or 15 house to an R52 house. You're going to go from a house that if you live in the mountains or if your neighbor's house catches on fire, your house could probably catch on fire. You don't have to worry about that. You're talking about, everything from stray bullets to drunk drivers hitting your car. I mean, you're the safety of the car, all of that for $70,000. Let's just say that, right? So if that's a big deal to you, now let me tell you if we were selling cars. So what if you've got I'm going to probably make people angry because of what car they drive, but say we've got a Hyundai, right? You got a Hyundai. I got a Hyundai sitting here and that's brand new on the lot. It's, $30,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I pull up and I pull a Mercedes C-Class up there. Same year, same everything, but a fully loaded Mercedes C-Class. And I tell you that you can buy it for $33,000. Which one are you going to buy?
I'm going to buy the Mercedes.
Are you going to spend $33,000 on a Mercedes C-Class, or are you going to spend $30,000 on a Hyundai? I don't think there's any way for people to look at this and go, if I can get apples to apples, that's amazing. Even if I pay 5% more, 10% more.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you, if you listen to what we're telling you and you do it the way we're talking about doing it, you can get your price down to be the same, if not less. We say it in the intro to this, you hear, Heather's the smartest numbers person I know. She has a master's degree in accounting. She crunches numbers all the time. She gets off on that. So I don't understand why that floats your boat. I think it's horrible. But the numbers and you look at it and you go, we're still comparing them all the time, constantly to stick frame to make sure that we're in line with the pricing. The other thing that's really easy, that's even simpler than that, is as builders and people that sell homes, we will match a stick frame home's price. If someone brings us a plan and says they're going to do this house for this much a square foot, we will say, fine, we will do the same house with ICF for the same amount of money. And we know that sometimes that may, in some years we may have made less money on that house. There's some years that we made more money on the house. When OSB was $90 a sheet, we were making more than that stick frame guy was. Now we're making less than the stick frame or the same as the stick frame guy, right? But we know we're building the best house we can give somebody. We're building them the absolute. We walk away from there and we hand them the keys and we know they have the most safe, homey, comfortable home that they can have.
Yep.
And we're not going to worry about them calling us back saying the air's whistling through and they the expense of the cost, or we don't have to worry about them, having any kind of, anything hurting the house, right? It's just durable. So resilient is the word we like to use. So anyways, I think that's kind of where you were getting at earlier, is like, this is not comparing apples to apples, but yet we're giving you the same price. Yeah. So I think that's what's really important. But anything you guys have question-wise? Did I miss anything, or you think anything else?
No, I think that's it for this one. We've gone long enough.
Yeah,
so hit us up on our socials at Build with ICF.
And
email.
Email us at info@buildwithicf.com. Anything you guys can think of, please shoot it over to us. If we miss something or if you have a question about anything on here, say it on every episode. We launch these on Fridays because it gives me the weekend to answer questions and emails back to people. So we know that there's a lot of questions and things that this will prompt to make people think about. Please reach out to us and let us know if you know of anybody that should be a guest on here. We're knocking out some of this basic stuff ourselves because we can do this without having to schedule people on here, but we are going to dig deeper and go in depth more about all of these issues, whether it be, we want to have everyone from, other installers, window companies, block companies, alignment systems, all these different guys we want to have on here. So we will get in depth more about everything, but we're kind of doing these general ones at first. But hit us up and let us know if there's anything we can do, or any questions that you guys have. Otherwise, we'll just keep putting these things out as
See you on
often
the
as
next-
we can. And
We'll see you on the next podcast.
that's not it.
That's not it.
That's a good ending.
You said sound effects. You wanted to do sound
I did.
effects.
Okay, I did a sound effect there. So that, you know what?
Okay.
Since I did that, I'll go ahead and do this. Because I screwed up the ending. Okay, now we're going to do our extra. And I want to thank everyone for listening. This time I'm going to hit the right button.
Okay.
You guys have a great day, and we look forward to you on the next episode.